Thin Places. Finders Keepers by Jamieson Wolfe. The world had moved on. Knowing this didn't make Jackson feel any better about his situation. His pockets were filled with trinkets and things that he could sell for a quick bit of cash from the world as it once was. Pieces of glass, jewelry, extension cords, pieces of twine, nickels and dimes, and other loose change that no longer counted as money. Books always sold for a fair price. People were always fascinated by the stationary quality of a book. It didn't light up, and you couldn't look up words in a dictionary by pressing your finger on a page. And the only way to turn the pages was by hand. Jackson wondered if people liked the novelty of it. Jackson always went to the faraway places, the ones that lay forgotten. He favored abandoned shopping malls, strip malls, and libraries. He found a lot of stuff in department stores, and he would also take the time to see if he could find any food for himself. Bent cans or the occasional Twinkie. Those things would outlast the apocalypse. As Jackson trolled the malls and forgotten stores, he would be careful. There were others that roamed the areas in the farther reaches of the world. Others like him that were gathering the flotsam and jetsam from the past in order to get by. While he tried his hardest to spare the lives of the people he met, the others were nowhere near as kind. Jackson carried a knife in his satchel for this reason. He also had to be careful to avoid mirrors, windows, or anything reflective. He wouldn't see his reflection in these surfaces, but always something that seemed like it was from the past, only they weren't from his past. While others saw the future and what would happen, he saw what had already happened. The specialist said that this was because of the schism when the world moved on. Something within it broke beyond repair. There were people who spoke in tongues when they had no previous issue with speech. There were others that had gone blind but saw emotions, and still more that had lost their hearing but could hear what would happen in the near future. His friend Rocco could understand dogs, and his other friend, Charlotte, who liked to be called Charlie, could hear the thoughts of those around her. They had said that the world would right itself eventually, and the problems or abilities they had would be temporary. That was 10 years ago, yet nothing changed. The issues hadn't gone away. It didn't bother Jackson. He just avoided looking in reflective surfaces. It made using a bathroom difficult, so he kept his hair messy and didn't shave very often. And sometimes, if he met a person wearing sunglasses, he didn't look him in the eye. He hoped that they didn't think him rude, but he didn't really care. It was worth holding on to a bit more of his sanity rather than sink further into memories from a past that wasn't his. He had once seen a woman making what looked like bread. Another time, he had witnessed someone shopping in one of the forgotten stores, placing items in a basket. In another, Jackson had watched a person at a bank count out crisp 20s. Though they were boring, ordinary events, Jackson found them endlessly fascinating. At first, he looked into every reflective surface he could find, but then he realized that he wasn't living his life. Not looking at reflective surfaces was easier than falling into the rabbit hole of glass. Jackson was about to enter a dilapidated store when his phone buzzed. He just had a small flip phone. It was older than most of the other touch phones, but it had one advantage. It had no glass to reflect images every time he picked up his phone. He flipped it open. "Yeah?" "Jackson, it's Charlie." Charlotte had a deep voice, and she always sounded raspy, as if she had drunk a whole bottle of whiskey. It didn't sound raspy right now. It sounded breathless and panicked. "Jackson, there's something going on. I don't know how to explain this over the phone. Where are you right now?" "I'm at one of the old stores on 5th and Bank, in the Old Town district." "Wait for me, okay? I have something I want to show you." "I was about to go on a run," he said. "And I'll help you. Just wait for me, okay?" "How long are we talking about here?" Jackson looked around him and noticed how exposed he was. He didn't want to be out in the open for too long. "How will you even find me?" he asked. "It's not like we have GPS anymore, and you have no idea where I am." "That's not an issue. I want you to think of my red dress. You know, the one with the sparkly red fringe. I need you to picture me in that dress right now. I don't know who else may be listening in on this phone call." "You want me to picture you in your dress?" Jackson said. "You have to be kidding me." "No, I'm not, Jax. Think of me in the dress, okay?" Just close your eyes and concentrate. Are you inside the mall? No, I'm out front. Well, step inside. I don't know who may be watching. You're starting to frighten me, Jackson said. What's going on, Charlie? Just do it, Jackson. Close your eyes and think of me in my red dress as hard as you can. Why do I have to close my eyes? Charlie let out a noise of frustration. It's how people always do it. Just come on, Jackson. Okay. Let me move into position. Jackson entered the store. The only letters visible from the sign were a faded W and a ragged M. He didn't have to worry about the glass in the front door, as it had been shattered a long time ago. He was careful not to get his clothes caught in the remaining pieces of glass and bent pieces of metal. He wasn't sure what he would find in this store. He had been here several times already. But Jackson knew that people would pay for the most obscure objects from the past, so he always went back. He never knew what he had overlooked. He spotted an earring on the floor and pocketed that. Walking further on, he picked up a packet of hot chocolate, a box of toothpaste, and a small silver ring. He tried it on his own finger, and it fit. Finders keepers, he thought. Hello, Jackson. Earth's Jackson. Okay, Charlie, I'm in the store. All right, now picture me in my dress. The red dress with the sparkly fringe. Yeah, red dress. Got it, Jackson said, closing his eyes. He had no trouble picturing her in the dress. Charlie had found it still on a mannequin during one of their mall runs. She had taken it for herself right away, and it hadn't needed any alterations. It was made for her, the first time she had worn it. Charlie let her long, curly hair down, and when he saw her, it looked like she was made of stars. He had heard a hum coming from in front of him. As he opened his eyes, he saw the outline of a person which gradually began to take on a more solid shape, like one of those old Polaroid photos he had read about. He thought there was something magical in the idea of watching a photo appear before his eyes. Jackson had been wrong. Watching a person appear in front of him was much more magical. In a few more moments, he could make out an arm, then a leg, now a curl of red hair. It was just under a minute. Charlie was in front of him, briefly covered in light. Then the light faded, and she was hugging him. Her embrace felt real, even if the fact that she was here in front of him was impossible. Jackson, you did it. You really did it, Charlie said, stepping back from the embrace. I don't understand what I did, he said. I think you were the one who did something. What just happened, Charlie? Concern suddenly clouded her eyes. That's why I wanted to tell you in person. Our powers are changing, Jackson. Our powers? We don't have any powers. Jackson held back a snort. We do, though. Just this morning, Rocco could hear the thoughts of not only the dogs, but of other animals too, like birds, cats, and wild animals that live in the ruins. What's more, he could speak to them. Like bark and meow at them? Jackson grinned. No, like talk to them in their minds, and they can hear him. My powers have changed too. Not only can I hear the thoughts of others, but I can travel to anyone who is thinking about me. She took his hands then. The world is changing, Jackson. This time he did let out a snort. Hasn't the world changed enough already? Do you want to be any more fucked up than it already is? Charlie shook her head, making her curls dance. No, Jackson. What I meant is that we're changing. Can't you feel it? The electricity in the air? In truth, he had felt something. It was as if a storm were building in the world, and he could feel it growing, shifting. If Jackson listened carefully, he could almost hear the beat of something within him that wasn't his own heartbeat. Jackson nodded. I do. Well, we should be careful. We should stick together in case something happens, Charlie said. Okay, Jackson said. You want to come with me while I look for more stuff? You might find something to go with that dress. Charlie nodded, and they worked their way through the store. Jackson picked up a wool hat, a pair of sunglasses, and a can that had no label. He put all of this into his satchel with the other things he had found. In the distance, he could see something glimmering. What's that? Jackson whispered, working his way over to it. Jax, leave it. You have no idea what it could be. That's what makes it fun. Come on. The flickering led him to what had once been the section that had held electronics. He saw smashed televisions and broken things called VCRs, which he vaguely recalled. In the corner of the section, there was what looked like a television sitting on a table, but Jackson knew that's not what it was. It had a keyboard in front of it. It was a computer. He was familiar with these, having used a few of them in his youth. Computers were different now. It was all done virtually, and there was no hardware. This one was different than the ones he remembered, though. For one thing, if it was flickering, the screen was gray, as if it had been washed of all brightness and color. Jackson started to walk towards it, his curiosity getting the best of him. "Jackson, don't," Charlie said. "Why? I want to see it." "Honey, I don't think it's a good idea. How many times have you been to this store to troll for objects to sell, and suddenly there's a fucking computer that shouldn't be? You would have taken the computer ages ago. It's a ruse of some sort. It has to be." "Well, shouldn't I find out what it's all about then?" Jackson said. He tried to see the surface of the screen and kept inching forward. "Make sure it's safe for others?" Charlie let out a loud sigh, but didn't stop him from moving forward. He would wish he had done so later. When he was finally in front of the screen, he watched the flickering static for a moment. After watching it shower like snow, he realized that he could see something within, a man's face looking at him. Reaching out, Jackson almost touched the screen, but stopped inches away. The snow cleared a bit. Normally, when he saw things in reflective surfaces, it was other people and what seemed like memories that one would see. This was the first time that someone was looking back at him. The man had a strong jaw and spiked dark hair. He wasn't sure, since the screen had no color, but Jackson thought the man's eyes were hazel. Charlie gasped behind him. "My God, Jackson," she said. "He looks like you. Jackson, step away now." Jackson ignored her, and with a finger reached to touch the screen, as the man on the other side did the same thing. The sound of static around them increased until it sounded like the air was full of whispers. When his finger made contact with the screen, the entire world went white around him. Jackson heard Charlie let out a loud scream, and the sound of whispering grew louder. Then all he saw was light, until it, too, faded. Jason looked at the words he had written on the screen. He wondered at Jackson's actions. His characters always did what they wanted to do in the end. He might plot his stories and novels down to the last detail, but they always had their own ideas. Jason could hear Jackson flailing around inside of his head even now. Jason hadn't known that he would write a computer into this scene, but sometimes his muses had other ideas. He wondered whether it was wise to base a character so closely on himself, though. There was a bit of him in every character. But Jackson was different, almost completely him. Jason wondered if that gave Jackson a different kind of power. Either way, the story needed a lot of work. Jason needed to take a break from the computer. He pressed save and went to make himself a cup of tea. Inside of Jason, Jackson raged.